Yeah. Okay. Perfect. All right. Great. We've got some more people joining. Welcome everybody. Thank you for taking time to join us. I know that there's a lot going on as a lot of you are getting ready to get squared away with starting classes and trying to figure things out. These are some wild times, but yeah, excited that you're able to take some time to join us. So I'm going to start off giving a quick overview of what we're going to be covering today, and then we're going to do some introductions. So this is those of you who had a chance to join some of the earlier chats that we've done. I know some of those have been specific to MBA or MSF. Hopefully you've got a good sense of what our office covers, our office being the Career Mgmt Center, and how we really focus on trying to help students finding work, internships, and jobs. So a lot of what we're talking about today is going to be really focused on that. So we'll do some introductions. We're going to talk a little about making transitions. We'll talk a little bit more about what our office does, give a little bit more detail. Start speaking a little bit about some of the things you want to be thinking about for working in the US, especially what that looks like when one is on a student visa. Certainly some of that is in flux right now, but there are some kind of key things that are pretty static. So we're going to focus on those. We'll talk a little bit about national career fairs. Hopefully, if time allows, we'll get to talk a little bit about networking, and then we'll wrap up talking about some next steps. So you all have some action steps that you all can be taking from there. Next slide is targeting the people who are not working in the US since they're not on the call. This will probably be something that I'll want to talk with them more about later. But if you are a corporate sponsored student, I think a big question that you want to be talking with your employer about is if you're able to work in the US for an internship, whether that's the summer or some other time. This is an email that I received from a past corporate sponsored student. So if any of you are in that case, these will be discussions I'll be glad to have more with you at a later point. And now I want to make sure you get a chance to know a little bit more about us and who it is that's presenting this to you. So this is the MSF coaching team, and we have Megan joining us. So Megan, do you want to add anything or say anything else?
I don't think so. I'm just glad I see a few, maybe 2 or 3 MSFs on the call. So it's great to see you. And everyone else as well, the MBAs too.
And those of you that are MSFs have probably had plenty of contact with Megan already. I know I am just recently starting to work with MSFs, so I'm looking forward to doing that, and I've had past experience working with a lot of undergraduate students at Vanderbilt, and MBAs. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that.
We're glad to have you, Brooke.
Thank you. So those of you that are MBA students, hopefully you kind of have a sense of who the folks are that are doing the coaching on that side. So I'm just one of the coaches, but there are others, Emily, Amanda, and Sandy. We work with students typically based on the different functions that you're working on. So for example, if you're pursuing roles in finance, I'm a good person to talk to, whereas if you're pursuing roles, for example, in operations or HOP or real estate, Sandy would be the person to talk to. Amanda is the contact for marketing and healthcare, and Emily works a lot with consulting. We also have some folks in our staff that spend most of their time working with employers, and also with kind of the online system, the 1220 system that you'll use in applying to positions. That's Courtney and Heather. You'll be getting to know them more later. And then I'm also really excited. This year we have 2 graduate interns, Peabody students that are joining our office, have been involved over the summer and have been a huge help, and they're here with us. So Danielle, is there anything you want to add?
No, hi everyone. I'm excited to work with you all soon. I'm really excited to get going with the Career Mgmt Center.
Thank you, Danielle. And Lauren?
Same as Danielle, I'm really excited to meet all of you and start putting names to faces. And I work more specifically with the MSF students, and Danielle will be working more with the MBA students. So it's really great to meet all of you.
Great, thank you both for being here. Maybe before we get going on too much more, I mean, something I feel like I kind of need to acknowledge is, I know for a lot of you, there are some big questions right now in terms of things like getting to the US, getting started, how does this all work? And I wish I had answers for those questions. I don't. I was on a call for a little bit yesterday with some folks from International Student Services and from other parts of Owen. And I know they're working hard to try to understand some of that, given what's going on with SEVP and Department of Homeland Security and things like that. If I were going to say anything, I would say this. I'd say those of you that are thinking about those things, please, here's who I would suggest being in contact with from Owen. I'd suggest, first off, being in contact with whoever you worked with through the admissions process. And Megan, correct me if you think any of this is different for MSFs. So I'd work on being in contact with those people to see what they know. I would also think about being in contact with Jerry West. If you haven't had a chance to connect with Jerry West, she works at the Student Programs Office at Owen. That's the office that works especially around student life and academic advising. And Jerry works specifically with international students within that. So that's another good contact for you to connect with. And then lastly, I would be in touch with Vanderbilt's ISSS office and be working with them. So yeah, I know there's a lot to address there. Part of me is a little bit thoughtful about the fact that we're doing this right now when there's so many questions kind of up in the air. But I do think it's important that we do this. And part of my rationale for that is when I think about what I saw in the spring, I know I saw a lot of students wrestling with difficult questions around things like immigration and what's going to happen, and really domestic students and international students, right? And from what I saw from a job search perspective, and Megan, I'd be interested to hear if you have thoughts otherwise, is the students that I saw that really said, hey, I know there's a lot of craziness going on, but getting a job is still important to me. And so I'm going to really do all I can to focus on that piece where I can. And obviously those other things impact a job, but if you're not working on it, it's not going to happen, to say it pretty simply. So for example, I saw some students who said, hey, I know there's all that craziness happening. I'm going to keep going on my internship search, my job search. And from what I saw, that group of students had a much greater success in finding something. The group of students who said, hey, I'm going to kind of wait. There's a lot of uncertainty. I don't know. I feel like a lot of them by the end of the summer got in situations where they're like, wow, like there's still things that aren't clear. And in retrospect, I wish I would have gone back and started working more on my internship and job search. So that's part of the reason that even though there's all this craziness going on right now, which I wish weren't the case, that I think it's still important to be thinking about and talking about these things. All right. If you do at some point want to talk about those things, like I said, glad to do that. That's probably a better conversation for one-on-one. I spend most of my time, again, thinking about kind of the work component of things. So some of this, which is going right now, I'd classify more into the immigration side of getting to school. So I probably not the best resource on that, but if I can point you in the right direction, I'm glad to do that. But let's talk about some other things. Relationship between GMAT and job offers. I'd be curious, what are your thoughts? Do you all, if you want to hop in the chat or if you want to unmute yourself, what do you all think? Is there a connection? Okay, I've heard that there is.
I understand that some consultancy firms.
For some consulting firms, yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, that's true, especially for some of the major consulting firms like McKinsey, Bain, BCG are kind of known for having a bit of a cutoff there. Yeah. So yes, it can be like a qualifier. Someone pointed out GMAT is probably a good predictor, but I don't think people ask for it except for consulting. Sometimes large banks, especially the major banks, might ask for GMAT scores as well. So yeah, so that's something out there. So we had a group of students ago, including a student who's actually at one of the major consulting firms I mentioned now, that did a study on this, and this was something we were a little bit surprised by. And so if you take a look there, what they found is that the folks that scored lower on their GMAT or did no GMAT, most of all, there tend to be a greater correlation with those folks getting a job as opposed to the people who scored highest on the GMAT. Although there was a slight correlation, as you can see, with those folks who scored higher on the GMAT making a little bit more in terms of average salary. Okay, so why do we put this out here? Why do we talk about this? I put this out there to say this. First off, I feel like a lot of students are a little bit surprised by that. I think everybody assumes that, hey, stronger GMAT, that should mean better chance on getting a job, right? And something I feel like I've seen is that a lot of students may come in from their past experiences, especially international students. Some countries really heavily weight things like standardized test scores or like GPA. And as we talked about, sometimes that is a qualifier. Like you may not have some opportunities without that. But I think this is really interesting because to me, what this says is if you're just spending all your time trying to do the best on a standardized test score, or don't tell the professors I'm saying this, but if you're spending all your time just trying to get the best GPA possible, that's probably not going to guarantee you a good job. I know that's different. I know from some of you in your past situations, that's been the opposite. So I think that a natural question would be, so what is it, right? Okay, so GMAT, getting a good GMAT doesn't guarantee, and Megan, thank you for the qualifier on the salary, I appreciate that. GMAT doesn't guarantee that you're gonna get a job. GPA doesn't guarantee that you're gonna get a job. So what does, right? What is it that's gonna help you increase your odds of getting a job, especially a job in the US? So I wish there was a simple answer. It's certainly not as simple as getting a good GPA or GMAT, but I'm going to give you some thoughts on that. So to start that conversation, let's talk a little bit about this transition curve. Have anybody run into this before? And if so, does anybody mind describing to me what it is or how this works? Any takers? You can either put something in the chat box or you can unmute yourself, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
Look, I think this is a transition curve based on the knowledge or understanding, or should I say perceptions of the probability of getting a job with the knowledge available, and with time and with maybe informed that,
Yeah. Well, thank you for the input on that. I will say, interestingly enough,
Brooke,
yes.
Yeah, I think I'll just add on to that. The curve just shows that when you're really overconfident and low your knowledge and reality, your confidence drops, and then ultimately the curve begins to rise with adequate knowledge and confidence.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Harris. I think that's a pretty good, that was an excellent quick summary of it. You covered it pretty well. So something that's interesting is I think the first person who spoke, I apologize, I missed your name, but mentioned that it could be looked at in terms of the job search, and I'm going to propose that there. This is actually almost like the 5 stages of grief. Yeah. I have found this curve mentioned a few times. Actually, the first time I heard of it was in other literature more around things like different parts of psychology. Like, as you can see, it applied in this slide. It's applied to addiction. Somebody struggling, I think in this example, struggling with cigarettes, someone who's addicted to cigarettes and wants to give up cigarettes, and they kind of start out early on in the curve, and they are deciding that they want to, I want to give up cigarettes now, and everything is good. It sounds, hey, I just need to make a decision in my mind. It's going to be easy. I can do it. They're in that uninformed optimism, and all of a sudden they start to experience the challenge, how difficult things really are, how hard things really can be. And that can be pretty tough. And all of a sudden they find themselves in a situation where they're saying, hey, this is going to be quite a bit harder than I thought it would be. And sometimes that can lead to a point of hostility or crash and burn or real, like just outright frustration because it's not what I expected. And that's a possibility. I would say that it's not often we see students encountering that with a job search, but that happens. We've definitely seen some people hit some low points. Usually what ends up happening is, even if someone does end up on this track for a while, people often start stepping back, taking a bigger perspective, continuing to keep working hard, even though they're not always seeing the results they wanted, and hitting a point of improvement. Just as you can kind of see here, as someone who's battling addiction. So this is not a perfect example of this, but this is a 2-minute video I'm going to play from a past MBA alum from the class of 2016. And he saw some pretty difficult things happen in his job search, and actually he's going to talk a bit more about some of the stuff that happened afterwards, but I thought this could give you a little bit of insight into someone else who's faced a challenge. And are you all able to see this? Can you all see Mukesh's video picture soon?
Yes, Brooke.
Okay, good. I'll go ahead and play then.
I came to Owen to specialize in corporate finance. Then for full time, I reached out to a lot of valuable undergrads and our fellow alumni from Owen. I got a role in corporate finance in Asurion, Nashville. At Asurion, I had a wonderful time for 18 months. And like all international students, I had to go through the H-1 Visa process. I was picked in the lottery, so we thought it was all done and we started celebrating. But our visa was denied last October, and I had to stop working immediately. And last year, a lot of MBAs who went into finance were denied their visas. And it's not just Owen, it's across the country. We immediately pursued the Canadian PR under the Federal Skilled Workers Program. The demographics in terms of age are changing in Canada. A lot of people are retiring and they need young folks to come and work. So they have this express entry program where if you have the skills in a particular field, you get X number of points and then you apply for the PR. A PR is permanent residency. So you can go into the country and pursue those opportunities anywhere in the country. So unlike the H-1B, you're not restricted to a particular firm or a field or a city. You don't need a job to get into Canada. So you can go work for anywhere in Canada in any field. The whole process took us less than 3 months, and we are moving to Vancouver next week. I reached out to our Owen staff here, and the first thing they did was, after congratulating me, they put me in touch with our Owen alumni in Vancouver. And they're the people I'm going to reach out to, and they're the first people I'm going to talk to once I land in Vancouver. Master's degree anywhere carries the same points for the PR process in Canada. So it doesn't matter where you do your MBA or where you do your master's. What matters is the skills you learn and the exposure you have and the network you're part of. If I had to do this all over again, I would change nothing. I would come to Owen and pursue the MBA, because it's just not a 2 years degree we get from Owen. It's a global MBA, and the folks I met and the exposure I got and the learnings I got from the professors, I wouldn't trade that for anything else in the world.
All right. Thanks for indulging me with that. And you all back to the PowerPoint now? Can you see that? Okay, great. So that's not an advertisement to come to Owen and leave and go to Canada. I hope you don't need to do that. I point that out more as an example of someone who I think went through a transition curve, but probably with around what ended up happening with them around immigration and wanting to stay in the US, and then running into problems with their H-1B and then needing to find other opportunities. So I think Mukesh would be an example of going through that. And I hope you don't have to experience anything like Mukesh or anything like this, the depths of this transition curve in your search. But if you do, please know that you're not alone. And please keep in mind that as things go over time, there's an opportunity for an awful lot of learning. I mean, Owen is a chance for, I think the reason a lot of people come here is that they know there's a lot of change that happen in a short period. And part of the reason that happens is because you encounter difficulty. And hopefully that gives you a chance to, as I mentioned on the bottom, learn some grit, practice some self-compassion, and develop a growth mindset to make the most of that. This is also kind of some input from one of our other alums who went through some of her own challenges. And she found that for her, 2 things that really helped her succeed were, 1, being more successful in managing one's time, and big part of that, as you can see below, is starting internship search early on, or job search early on, and starting to do that. And also things like making the most of Outlook, which is a pretty important skill set. Another thing mentioned here is embracing failure. And this is something else that alum brought up. A lot of people, I think, say failure equals trouble, failure equals I'm not enough. And I hope that you will have plenty of opportunities to practice embracing failure and learning from it. And I hope that you take those risks and remember that you've got support around you when you do hit hard moments. So we're going to talk a little bit more about our office and how our office works with students. But before I get into that, does anybody want to share what has it been like for you working with career services in the past? I know that career services can look pretty different. University career services can look pretty different from one country and one school to the next. Do you want to comment on that? Well, I'll assume from my conversations with other, yes, if anybody does want to share from their experience, yes, what it was like. It was more of a degree based rather the concentration.
Good morning, Brooke and everyone. Let me explain a little bit on that.
Great.
This is Ansh. So in my undergrad experience, so right now, like in Vanderbilt, we have you for finance and other folks for consulting, operations, HOP, and respectively, other aspect of MBA. In my undergrad degree, now I'm not sure if it's for everyone, but that's just for me. The career coaching was specific to just one aspect of to your degree, like for bachelor's degree, this is what you have to do. And these are the immigration steps you have to take. And okay, so you would go through orientation, you would meet your coaches, and they will explain you in a very generic perspective, rather than, okay, you're doing double E, so you have to look at these people. You're doing finance, you have to look at these particular set of companies. So lack of that particular horizontal segregation of majors was something which I experienced. And I feel like that is something different in Vanderbilt than, or I would say an MBA, than my undergrad experience with the CMC.
Got it. And Anshul, do you mind sharing, was your undergrad experience, was that in the US or was that outside the US?
Yes, sir. It was in the US. It was Purdue. I have an undergrad I have a degree in electrical engineering, and I was just saying from that perspective.
Great. Thank
you. And I think it's for
Sure.
most of the engineering schools, things change when you go for MBA. Like you have a more narrow approach towards these applications, but engineering is very vague. It's steps for immigration, steps for job search, and you're done.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
It sounds like it's done by engineers.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which a lot of times there's some perks to that. Well, great.
There's a difference to that, because engineers, it's the perspective of how you take interviews is completely different. You have a skill set, they need it, you're done. You apply online, you're done. MBA is completely different, in my opinion. It's about building relationships, and building relationships cannot just happen on applying jobs on LinkedIn or through a career website. You have to give it time. Slowly and steadily, it builds up over time, and that requires proper mentoring and coaching. Because in future, we'll be talking to people with, great intellect, and they are very polished in what they do, and they would like to be associated with people who they can think they're going to be like them. So that building that kind of relationship, I feel like it takes time and it requires mentorship. That's why engineering is, you have a skill set, you can code, okay, you can create a circuit, all right, let's hop in, let's start the work.
You're right. Yeah, there's almost a little bit more of a kind of, you have these skills, you can do this job. It's a pretty clear match, which it's not quite the same, I think, with MBA. So
yep.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Well, great. And I know, from my talking with past students, I know from different countries, career services can look pretty differently. So we're going to spend the next few slides kind of talking a little bit about what this looks like in the US. And some of you, bear with me, because some of you, this may be extremely familiar to, but for some of you, this may look a little bit different from what you've experienced in the past, and we kind of wanted to level set with everyone. So one thing I want to talk about is how different schools, even different MBA programs, approach on the career services side working with international students. Some of them have just one single person that works only with international students, and that's it. Some of them end up having every person in the office know some about working with international students and what that looks like from a work authorization perspective. And some schools end up using a bit of a hybrid model, and this is what we do. And in our hybrid model, what this means is those of you that are MSFs, you can work, with, there's a number of coaches there, like there's Megan and I that you can work with for MBAs. There's several coaches there. I am the person that tries to spend a little bit more of my time thinking specifically about what it looks like for international students, doing a job search, an internship search. Certainly doesn't mean I have all the answers. I wish I did. But hopefully I can be a resource as you're kind of working through things. But like I said, as this model shows, please feel free to be in contact with other folks. And Megan, if you want to add anything to that or to talk a little bit about things from here, feel free to.
Yes. So yeah, Brooke's exactly right. I think it's a nice perk of our office and a great model to have someone who is so focused on the needs of our international students like Brooke, but also getting the opportunity to gain different perspectives and hear from different coaches as well. So we are going to just do a few slides about kind of the process within our model, how we suggest that you go about your job search. So one thing, I love this image. It looks like we photocopied it into the slide. And some of you that are MSFs have probably seen a similar model in the pre-3. But one way I like to think about this job search process is thinking about it as having to have that foundation on the bottom to be able to build up from there. So really, as it says, assessment and research, like figuring out what your skill sets are, your attributes, things you're interested in, your values that can match up with certain companies, like having an understanding of all of that at the foundation to be able to bridge the gaps. Some of you have seen the gap analysis, and if you haven't, you will be seeing that soon. That is kind of the foundation of everything that I suggest students do as they start to prepare for the job search. And really from there, understanding what we like to call in the CMC our FIG, so our function, industry, and geography. I'm guessing many of you have heard us say that as well, but really having an understanding of what function, what industry, and geography you want to target. And then you can rank those by different things. So you might have kind of your A list and your B list. From there, having that inform your target company list and target contact list. So you'll hear us talk a lot about the 2-hour job search, where you build a nice list of 40 contacts. If you have started on the pre-3, if you're an MSF, and you will do this as well in career space and maybe International HQ, Brooke, building out that target company list and contact list, which is so important. It's really one of the best ways to move forward and start connecting and networking. So what that typically looks like for Owen students is maybe starting with the Owen alumni network, the Vanderbilt alumni network. If you went to school in the US for undergrad, really targeting that network as well. And then going down the path from there, applying, interviewing, and then hopefully we get to have that really exciting conversation where we are talking about the fact that you've received an offer. That's really the model that we suggest, and that has been successful for students for several years. And one thing, I always try to remember, even when I'm coaching students, is if we kind of go off the path and things feel like they're getting a little murky, we always need to go back and build that foundation back at the bottom again. So you can kind of picture this as you are moving forward through the job search process. We can go to the next slide, unless anyone has any questions about that. So some ways that you can engage and connect with the CMC. We, of course, have one-on-one scheduled coaching meetings, and you will have more information on how to set those up soon. Some of the MSFs are doing that already in ways that are just emailing me, but we're going to have a great new system where you can do that in a different way. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. Of course, it says walk-in hours. There may be more opportunities this year because of COVID and the unique situation we're in. Instead of a walk-in hour, we may be having, virtual drop-in office hours, group sessions, so small group sessions that are really helpful in ways to kind of hold each other accountable, and a CMC coach leads those. CMC workshops, so you have already started hearing a lot of our workshops, and you're in one right now. We will continue to do those through the school year, ways that we can frequently get great content and information out to you all. The Internationall HQ page that you've recently been added to, career space for our MBA students, and pre-3 for MSFs. And then of course, like you can see, just emailing us is always an option too. And we are happy to kind of facilitate and engage with you in all of those ways. Is there anything I'm missing on that front, Brooke, that you would normally add there?
I think that pretty well covers it. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth on a few of these, but I know there are probably some other things that we hop in as well, like collaborating with clubs and things like that. But we really want to be involved with a lot of different things and have a lot of different ways for you to connect with us.
Yeah, exactly. Great.
Sorry,
I might have access to switch them. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. Oh, I don't. So this is kind of a screenshot of what it will look like for you to schedule coaching meetings with us in our new career system that you will be getting to experience really soon. So when you will schedule meetings with us, these are kind of a few things that we are here for, right? And that you can kind of select what you want to meet with us about on this particular day. So telling your story or getting a great audit of your LinkedIn page. If you're still in the exploratory phase, like you're not sure what you want to do, you might select career path conversations. Perhaps you're sending out, 50 emails a week and you're not getting any responses on those emails. You might select networking support because you're not getting great return on those emails. So coming in and saying, what am I doing wrong on these emails? I need some help with this. Pep talk and motivation, that is kind of a big part of our job. So we love to do that and encourage our students, and there's no shame in clicking the pep talk and motivation button. We love to help and motivate, and sometimes that can mean a combination of some of the things you're seeing here as well. So the first and foremost, we'll probably be working through that resume review selection, but I think that covers some of the things that you can, come in to work with us on. And there may be an other button, and if so, you'll, of course, you can fill in the blank and tell us more about if it didn't fall into one of these buckets. But this will kind of be the system that we're going to use this year to schedule meetings with us. Yeah. Oh, Sushant says, when will these one-on-one scheduled coaching meetings go live? Brooke, do you want to talk about that for MBA?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact date. It is. I know it's going to be early August. I think it's going to be in the first week of August. But some of that is still in transition. I know for sure that for MBAs, we're going to have a session on August 10th where you all will get a training on the new system. It's called 1220. So yeah, at that point, everybody should be up and running. So it's coming soon, and we'll make sure that we're letting everybody know through emails and things like that.
Yeah, and for MSFs, you will be getting a training too, and we actually haven't set it yet because it was a bit complicated to set if the MBAs don't know, MSFs are starting to receive credit-bearing classes starting on August 3rd. So our priority was really filling in those classes. But you'll have a session on using this new system as well sometime during the orientation time period. And on that note, just thinking about our online resources, and I should have reminded us, Brooke, to add the pre-3 on here.
I know, I was just thinking that too. I'm sorry.
No, it was my fault. But the online resources, CMC's career space within Brightspace. Of course, the pre-3, the Walker Management Library page. Some of you have had some exposure to the Walker Management Library at this point. If you haven't, they are just such an incredible resource. And I always say some of the most underused resources. Such a great means to prepare for an interview. They're just wonderful. So in addition to that, also that, again, the Internationall HQ Brightspace page that you're recently added to, keeping an eye on all of those resources, as well as the career systems that have job postings. Yeah. Did I miss anything there?
I think you got it.
Okay. Yeah.
And let us know if you have any questions on Internationall HQ. Like, as you mentioned, you've hopefully seen some emails on that. That is a resource that's only open for international students. It's something that our office works a lot with, but there are other offices like Jerry West and the Student Programs Office has posted a number of things there. As you can see on the top nav bar, there's links to ISSS and things related to health and wellness. So there's certainly a lot of CMC resources, but there are other things there too. Also, I know speaking of Internationall HQ, I know I was looking at some of the questions that you all posted. Thank you for posting those. And there's one or two questions out about how do we find which employers have hired international students in the past? I think the question was maybe specific to MSF or MBA. And I know there are a couple of resources there that can help with that, probably a little bit more on the MBA side. But if you've looked through that, one of the things that it mentions is how on some of the recent employment reports, you can find some of that. There's also a great list that we share with peer schools. And I think it covers for 3 different years. You can look and see which companies have across, I think it's about 20 different peer programs. I believe it's mostly MBA, but it could include some specialty master's programs as well. But it tells you from all those different schools. You can't see which schools were students hired to which companies, but you can just see from all those schools which companies are hiring international students. So there's some great information on there. And if you have thoughts of other suggestions, please let us know.
Yeah, and on that front, Brooke, kind of the same goes for MSF on the employment report. We do have kind of the asterisk that notes which companies hired international students. Just talking to your coach about that, some online resources. There's a lot of different ways to go about building out that knowledge. But one thing Brooke and I had talked about too on that front is that I've had students who have gotten offers who are international students where the company has not historically hired. So just thinking about kind of a holistic picture when you're going through the process.
I noticed, Shushan, in the chat box, you posted the H-1B data info. That's one of the resources that's linked to on Internationall HQ page. There's a section specifically about how do I find out which companies sponsor. So please check that out. I hope it can help. There's that. Also, there's a question about with the library, what you can access if you're there, if you can't be there in person. There's a ton of really good resources on there. Like actually, when I think of the main resources I suggest for students are resources that are available online. I know there's more and more things that they're making in hard copy that they're making access to digitally. But most of the job search resources are online databases and online resources, several of which, again, are linked to an Internationall HQ. Off the top of my head, Hoover's is such an awesome resource. Uniworld is an awesome one for international students, especially if you're thinking of working abroad or looking for companies, multinational companies that span multiple locations. So there's some great stuff there. All right. Briefly, I'm going to talk a little bit about the group sessions. We do some different work with students in groups. So this first thing is the ISCG. This comes from a recent initiative. This is not specific to the CMC. It's folks from different offices across Owen that have been checking in with international students and just want to provide a resource and some support and encouragement, especially through all that's going on. So I believe a number of you have gotten an invite for an event that's coming up. I can't remember the exact date. It's coming up in like the next 2 weeks. It's an evening session. And we'll have a chance to kind of connect with some of you all through that. So that's a good resource. There's a little bit more on that on Internationall HQ as well. Something else I'm going to mention here is the CMC does some small group sessions where we get groups of students together to work on things. MBAs, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this in a session we have coming up, but we're actually looking at, for the first time, starting some of our internship search groups really early on, right around the same time that classes start. This is an idea that we got from a rising second year international student, and ran it by some other folks, and they really like the idea as well. So that's something I want you all to kind of be thinking about if you're interested in. I think it'll be a good way for us to stay in touch. So, but those groups are, I mean, just basically a way to have some accountability, have some support, and have some regularity to making sure you're connecting with others in your search. One other resource I'll mention, first off, this is a good book. I confess I'm only partway through it. It's written by someone who did career advising with international students at University of Maryland, and he left and started his own business. It's called The International Advantage. He wrote a book. In reading through the book, I've really enjoyed it. And there's actually a section there that I really liked a lot, and a lot of the book I've liked a lot, but one section is what career advisors can do to help international students. So that can also provide some good insight on this. There's a lot of other campus resources. We were talking about the library, ISSS. I think a lot of you know. There's the English Language Center that can help with working on accents and things like that, and just practicing conversation. There's a Center for Social Ventures, Turner Family Center for Social Ventures. There's those of you interested in healthcare. There's some resources through that. Those of you who attended to the recent MBA session on that may have gotten a chance to meet Birchwood. So there's a lot of good resources that relate to you all on campus. I think something I would keep in mind with the job search is my goal, I think, when I'm working with students, and I think for a lot of the rest of us as well, our goal is not to make you dependent upon us. We don't want you to get to the point where you're like, hey, every time in the future when I want to look for a job, I need to come back to Megan or to Brooke or to the CMC. I will say that there are staff in our office who work with folks after you graduate, so that is a good resource to have. But actually, in talking with some of the staff who do that, Lacey and Sylvia, to me, one of the best compliments that they've given is when they look at some of the students who've really utilized CMC resources, they say those students are so much further ahead when they graduate. There's some other programs, not either of the programs that are represented here today, that don't have that, and those students are really much further behind. So we hope that we can give you kind of the skill of teaching you how to do a good internship and job search, because it's something you'll keep doing through the rest of your life. This is a slide I like a lot. Actually, this is completely ripped off. All I did was take off the other school's logo on the bottom. But I really thought this slide was excellent from another US MBA program, because it really hits on some of the common assumptions. The first assumption, I think, goes to a little bit of what we're talking about. Like, we're an educational institution. We're not a placement agency. And I think I can sleep better at night because of that, because like I said, we want to give you skills that you can keep replicating, because I mean, the average time for, I know, an MBA is about 18 months that you have your first job. So you are going to be doing a lot more job searches in your life. And so hopefully you're getting skills that can help with that. The second one is there is a list of companies who sponsor. There is no list of companies that are going to sponsor for the upcoming year. It does not exist. There is historical data, which I think is very different. But I mean, those of you who are finance students say, I mean, in my mind, this is equivalent to saying, I know what's going to happen with the stock market. If anybody does that, be very skeptical. Ask them to prove it. But just likewise, we don't know what's going to happen with the economy. We don't know exactly which companies are going to sponsor next year. It changes. But we do have some good data from the past we use. Next assumption is that it's easy to find a job in the US. It is not. Part of the reason we showed that transition curve is it's one of the greatest challenges that you'll probably face. In my talking with past international students, that's what so many of them have said. I wish that weren't the case, but it is. The fourth point there under common assumptions, I think that goes to the GMAT point, right? Some people think, oh, if my GPA is perfect, my resume is perfect, then I'll get the job every time. That's not it. I think things like adaptability and some of the other things we'll talk about in a moment are actually far more important. So if you look at the reality, I think that gives you some counterpoints, some of the very things that we just talked about. At that last point, American recruiters, they're not looking just for a single score, looking for networking, likability, how adaptable someone is. Again, some of the other things we're going to talk about in a little while. And at the bottom, I think these are some really good points as well. The importance of kind of working together, check in with us. And I'll say, even if you talk with me, feel free, if there's anything that you wonder about that I say, please check in with other people. Don't feel like you have to rely only on me or really anybody from the CMC as the sole source of truth. Talk with alums, talk with your classmates, but I think the mistake is just talking to any single one person and saying, well, that person said it and I don't need to ask anybody else. Don't hesitate to ask our questions, and keep pursuing multiple different options. A really good point in the chat box. It's easier to get sponsored by non-American companies with operations in the US. Yeah, that's a really good point. Because a lot of those companies are very familiar with the process. And that UniWorld resource that I mentioned through the library is the best single way that I know of to identify companies that do operate in multiple locations in the US and somewhere else, for example. I love this slide. Spend some time, look through it. I know we went through it quickly. I hope you can learn some of it. So this slide offers some things that don't really work. If I were going to try to summarize what it is that allows an international student or domestic student to be successful in a job search, I'd say it's this. It's early. That's why we're meeting now. We want to get you all started. It's folks that are hungry, people that are willing to work consistently, people that are going to persevere through that transition curve and aren't going to stop and get stuck. It's humility to say that I'm going to have to put myself in some uncomfortable situations. I'm going to have to really challenge myself. I'm going to have to keep learning because there's always more to learn. I'm going to have to keep asking others for help because I don't know everything. And I think humility also translates, you saw this in the last slide, this idea of being likable. My experience, I work with a lot of students, and students that are humble in their job search are usually those that come across as far more desirable to hire by a lot of employers.
Yeah, I would echo that, Brooke.
Oh, yeah, okay, good. Connected, I think, is so important. And that goes to this whole idea of networking, engaging with other people. And again, if you're taking that concept in tandem with humility, you're connecting with other people because you know there's always more that you can be learning. And you're always doing a good job of being able to perspective take. MBAs, those of you that will participate in the resume workshop we have coming up next week, you'll hear me say that I think one of the greatest factors in succeeding in a job search is being able to think like an employer. And if you can do that kind of perspective taking, I think it makes you far more successful. I know for me, I feel like I got much better at doing a job search when I had a chance to start sitting on the other side of the table, to sit in on interviews, to hear what questions are asked, to hear how employers are kind of making those kinds of decisions. The last point is determined. You're going to get rejected. It's going to happen. If you don't, you're not trying hard enough. You're being far too cautious. But you need to learn from those rejections and you need to keep going. And there's that concept of adaptable. In my mind, this slide and the slide before it are probably the two most important. I know they're kind of in the midst of everything here, but I think those are really key. So briefly, you can do this as almost a self-quiz, and we're not going to get too in-depth on some of this now, but there are a lot of different terms that international students need to know to be able to do a job search in the US, okay? If you're looking at some of these terms and you don't know what they are, at this point, that's probably not an awful thing, but if I were you, these are some terms you're going to want to get to know pretty soon, okay? By the way, one of the questions in the International HQ was about if there are special benefits to being a citizen of Mexico or Canada. And the answer to that question, I would say, is you want to look into the TN visa, okay? And glad to talk about that more later. So here's a quiz for you all. Can you work on campus with an F-1 visa? Can you work off campus on an F-1 visa? Yes, I'm seeing a no. Through CPT, yep, good, all right. yes, you can work on campus and on F-1 visa. It's pretty straightforward. Off campus is a little bit more difficult, but CPT does offer that option while you're taking your courses. Also, later on, you'll actually be able to use OPT. You're still on your F-1 visa when you use OPT after graduation. Okay. Another reason those terms we were just looking at are important is because you're going to face questions like this. On a job posting, you're going to get this question. You're going to see the statement. We don't sponsor international candidates, but you think you've heard from other people that they have. You may even use some of the resources we were just talking about to find evidence that they have in the past. What would you do? You apply and let them reject you. Don't reject yourself. You reach out. Yeah. I think those are great. I think those are great responses. I'm going to say I don't think there's a single perfect answer. Network. I love that. Absolutely. Yeah. I think probably the worst answer would be to give up, to not do anything with it, especially if it's a company you're really interested in. But I think that was great what you all suggested. So really briefly, I'm going to talk about 3 different things. And I assume everybody here is on an F-1 visa. If you are not on an F-1 visa, I know that there are a couple people in some years that we've had on a J-1 visa. Feel free to send me an email afterwards or send me a private chat and let me know, because things look a little bit different for J-1s. First off, most of them need to go back to their home country. Not all of them, but most of them. But if you're in CPT, or if you're in F-1 visa, one thing you want to think about is CPT, which allows you to do internships in the US. Those of you that are on the MBAs that are on the last call, we talked a little bit about that already. There's the requirement of the Management 6902 course, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And typically that's used before graduation, okay? Typically that's not something, correct me if I'm off on that, that's not something that a lot of MSFs use with the program being just 1 year.
Yes, that's right.
Optional practical training is something that I encourage all of you to think about if you want to work in the US. The requirement is just that you graduate, and then after that you use OPT. And a number of you, all MSFs and a number of MBAs, especially if you're thinking about concentrating in finance or ops analytics, you have the STEM option, which is amazing and really helpful. So that's something to keep in mind. And then, of course, there's the H-1B, which is the single most used visa for our students after they graduate, okay? And that's moving off the F-1 visa. So that's just a starting point about that, but hopefully what I've said sounds familiar to you. If not, if you're not comfortable talking with employers about that, that's definitely something that you want to be learning more about so that you can do that. Same true for H-1B. So Shushan, on your question, I assume you might be talking about if there are some questions from USCIS about H-1B and how it's being used. There's the request for evidence that have sometimes been used with OPT. So I know there have been situations where students have run into challenges using both. I mean, Mukesh's example is someone who actually, he ran into an RFE both for OPT and then ran into some trouble with his H-1B. So it is possible. Thankfully not something that happens all that often, but it'd be a good thing to keep learning about. Let's see, question about STEM OPT. Is it enough to get the requisite concentration, or does that job? That's a great point. Yes, to your point. I know that's a little bit gray, but for those of you who are graduating with a STEM in a STEM area, your work does need to relate to that degree. And my understanding of what that looks like is when you are an OPT, please, if anybody's used OPT and wants to correct me on this, please do. But when you're on OPT, you end up using, you end up doing a training program, training plan, and that training plan kind of outlines basically how your work is connected with that degree. All right. Okay, yeah. So that would be something to think about then. Yep, in order to benefit from that, unless there's an option for law, then you'd want to use, if you want to use a STEM OPT, it would be leveraging the MSF. So glad to talk more about that later. That helps. Okay, of course, I will say with all this stuff, ISSS is the experts on campus. Obviously, it's something we talk about with students because you need to be ready for it. But ISSS is really the people that know the most. They're the ones who actually hold your F-1 visa on campus. Something I'll say here for MBAs, if you are going to be working in the US or interning in the US, I should say, you're going to want to take advantage of this MGT 6902 course. I'm the instructor for that course. It's a requirement for getting CPT. And if you would, those of you that are MBAs, please update your Outlook calendar with your courses. And what I'm going to be doing in the next few weeks is I'm going to be finding a time when we can all meet to talk more about, we'll have our first class session on that and talk a little bit more about CPT and getting started on that. So I'll remind you, but please update your Outlook calendar. And that's a good thing for all of you to do, especially as you're trying to schedule things with classmates. That's a good question about working in a finance department. My understanding is that it seems to me like that could work, but that would be something I would take to ISSS to double check that, to make sure that it fits. And a lot of it's going to depend on how the role is classified. I'm just going to briefly touch on this. These are part of the reason that you want to be ready for some of these things is these are questions that you might get from employers. Okay. And you want to be ready to address these questions. Okay. The only way that I think you can be really successful in helping employers understand answers to these questions is if you really know a lot what you're talking about. And we're going to have more opportunities. We mentioned that our office helps with things related to work authorization. We invite ISSS to come to Owen, and they've done virtual sessions with Owen students to talk about CPT and OPT. And we will even later in the year invite some immigration lawyers to talk about H-1B and other things related to visa status. But you need to take advantage of that. And you also need to be doing a lot of learning on your own. So I'd encourage you to be thinking about that. Okay. And one thing I do want you to think about, and this is a question that we will come back to later, is why would an employer, I mean, it's challenging to hire an international candidate. Why would an employer do it? And I will say that there are reasons. I'm not going to go through all this now. I love this, though. I think this is one of the other slides that to me is a real takeaway, because I think this captures what it is that international students bring to the table. Even though it is challenging, even though job search does look different with it being remote right now, there are still companies, a lot of companies that are interested in hiring international candidates. I think the simplest reason why is that there are so many companies that serve international clients. They solve problems that are international, and they know that if they're only having people from the US try to solve those problems or try to work with those clients, it's not going to be as successful. I mean, there's a lot of other reasons, from language differences to cultural differences, but I think this really captures why you all add so much, and why I'm glad that you're here and kind of thinking about these things. Okay. So let's go ahead and we're going to take a moment, and we've been trying to learn how to use breakout rooms, but we're going to have you all divide up. Actually, Danielle is going to divide you all up into breakout rooms, and you're going to have a chance to, in the breakout rooms, introduce yourself. And then think about what are you most excited about this year? And then what are the questions or concerns about the job search that you have? Okay. So we're going to do that for about 15 minutes. And then we're going to all come back. So let's all plan to come back here at about 11:20. We'll actually, I think, can bring you all back after that. But if you would kind of keep an eye on that. And we'll send these questions to you in the chat box just as a reminder for you to be working on those. All right, Danielle, anything else that you need before we go ahead and do the breakouts?
I don't think so. You guys will get a notice, I think, when you have about a minute left. So I'm going to go ahead. I think it will automatically
back. All right, welcome back, everybody. Hope that all worked well. Thanks for patience with us, Danielle. Thanks for figuring out how the breakout rooms work. So there's a couple more things that we want to cover before we wrap up. I know we're set to go just about 5 more minutes. So I'm going to talk really quickly about a few things. And then I think what we'll probably do is if anybody needs to get off right at 11:30, please feel free to go ahead. I'll go ahead and I can stick around for a while. So if we have time, I'd would love to hear some more of the questions or concerns that came up and things like that. So yeah, that's where we're headed in our last few minutes. Okay, so one thing I want to make sure we get a chance to talk about is the National Career Fair, career fairs and conferences that are coming up. This is something that, if you haven't heard of these before, this is a picture of one of the national career fairs. I believe this is the National Black Career Fair, which is typically the largest in terms of numbers. These events happen each year. This year will be the first year. They will be all virtual. All of the 4 major ones I've mentioned before are virtual. The good news is with virtual, costs will be less. Usually getting there, participating, having a hotel, all of that can be pricey. And I think also because it's virtual, the cost for some of these events, the price is down quite a bit. I believe the Veterans Career Fair is actually going to be free this year, from what I've seen. I don't think Prospanic has mentioned pricing yet. National Black, it'd be worth checking to see if there's still the early bird pricing. I don't know if that's still there, but it's typically, I think just to register is typically about $200 to $300. As you can see, one of the benefits to these events is you get a chance to interact with a lot of employers. So it's something to be thinking about. Obviously, a huge part of these events is to promote diverse hiring. So let's see, any of those is restricted people that fit the name description. So good question, Manuel. So it depends on the fair. So with Veterans Fair, you do need to be a veteran. I will say my understanding, and please correct me if someone knows otherwise on this, that the Veterans Fair, you have to have served in the military, and it doesn't necessarily, I believe, need to be the US military, but that event is specifically for vets. For the Reaching Out LGBTQ event, RAMBA event, the way that event works is you need to work through the club on a given campus. So there is an Out and Allied club at Owen, and you need to work through that club in order to be able to get access to register for that event. With the National Black event and the Prospanic event, those are open. My knowledge and experience that anybody can attend those events. I will say, with all those events, the people, so typically if you think about this from an employer perspective, typically the people who are going to be attending from that employer are people that represent those groups. So for example, at the Prospanic event, that's when you're going to see the most people with that are Latino, Latinx background, right? So it's going to probably be a far easier conversation if you fit that demographic, and they're specifically looking to bring people in from that group. But you don't have to, at least for National Black and Prospanica, you don't have to fit that category. Question, a lot of diversity events, recruiting going on. As a candidate which doesn't fit the category, should I still apply via such events, or be more futile to do so right now? Anshul, that's a good question. I think in my mind, it's probably a little bit different for some of these events, especially National Black and Prospanica, that are a bit open, as opposed to events where it says you really have to kind of fit what their qualifications are for that. So I would say that's probably a little bit different. I would think ideally in my mind would be to have some conversations with people at that organization and kind of see what they fit, what they think, or how defined things are in that category. So it's a complicated question. I will say, I mean, something that to my mind is important is, at least with, I think is interesting with the RAMBA event, is they want to include allies, right? So I would say, if you're going to the National Black or Prospanic event, if you don't fit those groups, you probably want to be able to talk about where diversity is important in your life. I'm thinking about that. Oh, Megan, thank you for adding some of the pricing. That's awesome. Megan, did you have any other thoughts about that question about kind of like diversity, and what if one doesn't fit the exact category they're looking to recruit for?
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered it. I do think we see students, as you mentioned, they may not fit the category of the diversity. They still might attend those events and be successful. Again, it's going to look a bit different this year with the virtual nature of the events. I think, if it's in your budget, and you are interested in the opportunity because it's virtual, it's like, why not do it this year to get exposure to those companies, get exposure to likely like contact names at those companies. And like Brooke said, specifically Prospanica and National Black are more open. And with veterans, you have to have served and reaching out the Ramba conference, either LGBTQI or an ally. You know, those are a bit more specific to the diversity they're recruiting. So those don't apply as much, but for National Black and Hispanic, I think absolutely. And MSFs that are on the call, I typically encourage MSFs to go to those events, especially if they fall into the category, just because they are more targeted at MBAs. However, over the years, they continue to look more at graduate one-year program students. So for MSFs, definitely be thinking about attending those, and we can talk about those one-on-one.
And I'm going to, and hopefully this will answer Manuel's question. Like, what do these events actually look like? So some of you had a chance to interact with Sambit. He is a rising second-year MBA. He attended National Black last year. So these are some slides that he put together. As you can see, it's busy. It's an awful lot of people going. Of course, last year it was in person, but I show this to point out that he did a lot of research kind of ahead of time, thinking about which employers, there's lots of employers that show up, but which employers does he want to target and why? And for him, what it looked like was usually what you're trying to do is you're trying to apply ahead of time, applying ahead of time to employers so that you can get interviews scheduled. And so he had a scheduled event, for example, a scheduled interview with AB InBev. During the event, he was able to secure another interview with Cisco. He was invited to the evening event, and then he had some conversations with some other employers. So this is sort of his suggestion, and I think this works pretty well, around what are some of the things that you can start doing to prepare yourself. Getting your resume ready, thinking about how you can talk about your background, thinking about some of your key strengths, your unique selling proposition, starting to be thinking about your experience in terms of a STAR format so you can talk about that in an interview, identifying companies that sponsor, and then doing some final research and going to the event. So that's what worked well for Sambit. And that fits up pretty well from what I've seen from a lot of other students who attend these events. And then Anshul, you bring up a very good point. And I think that's where, if I were you, it's going to depend probably a little bit on the event. It's going to probably depend a little bit upon the company and you as a person. And I think that's where, if you don't fit the category, I would try to use some of the other resources out there. Try to talk to some of the second years. Try to talk with us to see what makes sense for you for that given event. I feel like there's an easy across the board answer. Although I will say, as you can kind of pick up, as you can see from Summit's example, there is a bit more flexibility around the National Black and Prospanica career fairs. And I think another thing that could be worthwhile too is it could also be something where you may want to talk to people who are in that category. Talk to someone who is Latinx and say like, hey, I'm thinking about going, like, do you have thoughts? Could be a second year, like, were there other people who went who didn't have that background? Are they, how are they welcome? How does that work? And kind of hear from their experience too. Okay, we're going to skip talking about networking, but I'm going to put these slides up, a lot that you can kind of think about with that. And I'm going to try to wrap things up here just with a couple of last points. I know we're over time, so I've just got a few last slides. And in my mind, these last slides are basically kind of like the what's next. What do you need to be doing from here out? So MBAs, we're going to do an event on Friday around this same time. I think we're going to start a little bit earlier at 9:30. And we're going to do a resume workshop. To get yourself ready, please do what's mentioned here. And I'll put some reminders out on this, but please use CareerSpace to do your gap analysis, look at the sample resumes, and start drafting your own resume. If you haven't done that already, I hope you have. And then make sure your resume is in the Owen format. There's an Owen format that you'll find on CareerSpace. And then have that resume in Word. And what we're going to do is we're still figuring out exactly what that session will look like, but you'll almost certainly be sharing your resume with some of your classmates. So if there's any kind of unique identifying, like You can take off your name if you want, although kind of know who people are. So if you want to take any scholarship information off or GMAT information off, you can take that off your resume for the purpose of this exercise, and then bring those resumes ready in digital form, because we'll be kind of working with each other on improving your resume. So that's coming up on Friday. And these are some kind of next steps for everybody. For corporate sponsored MBAs, you saw that slide early on. Start thinking about, can you do an internship outside of your company? How does that work? For MBAs, we'll talk about this more next Friday. We'll be thinking about starting those internship search groups. So bring any questions you have about those internship search groups, and we'll talk about timelines and getting that started. MBAs, please update your Outlook calendar. Put your Mod 1 classes in, put any other obligations or other things in, and I'll use that to start setting up the Management 6902 first session. Everybody, please consider the national career fairs that we just talked about. Be thinking about those. Like I said, talk to classmates, talk to second years, talk to alums, talk to people who've attended something similar. And then everybody, we didn't get a chance to talk too much about networking, but I would encourage you to, if you haven't started with your networking already, if you feel like you can start coming up with some good questions to ask second years and to learn from their experience, please reach out to them. We're going to later today put up on Internationall HQ a spreadsheet. It's going to be a list of all of the second year MBAs, including the companies that they entered with, the title, the function, the industry. It'll tell you which of them were on a visa, student visa, or which weren't. And please start reaching out to them and having some conversations. Be respectful. A lot of them are in a busy season of their internship, but they're an amazing resource and really want you to take advantage of that. If you want to do some reading, here are two good books. I mentioned one earlier that I'd recommend. Some great resources if you've got some extra time. And that is all we have in terms of content for today. So like I said, I know we have some questions that have come up both from Internationall HQ and from the breakout rooms. So if anybody needs to take off, please go ahead and do so. But I know at least I'll plan on sticking around for a while. And if we can address any of the questions that you have, we'll try to, or if not, we can hopefully point you in the right direction. So yeah, feel free to go ahead and either put a question in the chat box or just unmute yourself and ask a question. And I'll probably start out, if it's okay, I'll probably start out recording some of these questions. So if you have a question you feel like is very personal or very specific to you, you may want to wait until later on, and then I'll turn off the recording later on. But yeah, does anybody kind of have any questions for the group or questions that came up from your breakout?
Yeah, so I asked this question on the Internationall HQ also. I was just, again, it's very hard to point out right now with respect to specific employers, but generally speaking, I mean, with respect to the current situation, it seems likely that the first semester might be online for the international students. So, I mean, how, and given the fact that the internship applications and recruitment process takes place in the first mod and the second mod only, so how would an employer, how likely would an employer be to give an internship opportunity for someone who's not in the US currently? And given that, I mean, there's also some uncertainty even after the first semester, at least some kind of uncertainty. So would that affect the chances of someone getting an internship offer?
That's a good question. I'm glad you're thinking about it. So I'll give you my thoughts. So there's definitely a lot that's going on, and we don't know what exactly things are going to look like. But there are some things that to me are good indicators on this question. So one is the fact that Owen, like many other schools, business schools, recruiting is going to be entirely virtual. So because of that, and because a lot of the major events like the national career fairs are going to be entirely virtual, in some ways, I think a good thing about that is it levels the playing field. In my mind, there's not going to be a disadvantage in interacting with recruiters, because the Vanderbilt policy is right now guests are not allowed on campus. So company representatives are not allowed on campus. And we in the CMC, we're going to be working with you all virtually as well. So, and part of the reason that we're going to be doing that is to make sure that students have the same experience, that students who are in person aren't going to be getting something more or something extra. It's going to be the same across the board because it's going to be virtual for everyone. Another reason that we're doing that is because we want you all to be ready for interacting with people and doing recruiting virtually, because that's how it's going to be. So I think that answers some part of your question. My guess is if I were an employer, the other parts I'd be thinking about would be some of the uncertainty right now with regards to hiring. And we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but we do know that, I mean, so many employers have moved to doing completely virtual internships. Vast majority of employers have done that. And so if there is a situation where people still aren't able to come into the US, I mean, one possibility is that some employers I think a lot of employers will have to say like, hey, we have a virtual track or not, or if US continues on the track we're at, I hope that's not the case, but it could be that everything will be virtual for everybody. So I guess in my mind, something I talk a lot about with international students is, what can you control? What can't you control? And I think the thing that you can control is a lot of the things on the slide: being humble, starting early, staying motivated, working hard, staying adaptable and flexible. So I think you focus on controlling those things, and then we figure out how to roll with things from there. And we all want to be a resource. We want to help you with those things. We're going to be figuring some of this out as we go. But we've seen students like Mukesh encounter difficult challenges before. It's just one single example. And things have not always been perfect, not always been ideal, but have usually worked out, and usually worked out pretty well. So that's, I mean, I'm trying to give you the most honest answer I can. I hope that helps. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah, some of you need to go, and that's completely fine. But yeah, I've got time, so I'll kind of stick around. So take care of those of you. Thanks for joining us, those who were able to make it. Yes, Shushant?
Sorry, yeah, bro, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So I had a personal question. So I was trying to apply for small boutique firms in finance. So they don't have a specific career site. They just have a drop box where you drop the resume and the cover letter. I have them ready, sort of ready. So what do you suggest? Shall I start dropping them off? And I've tried to network at least to some people working there. Some of them sponsor H-1B. So how do you suggest I go about that?
It's a good question. So you're applying to finance firms, and you said it's just kind of a general drop box. They don't have it's not like applying to a specific posting.
They are really small firms, 50, 100 people max.
Okay. I mean, first off, I think that's awesome that you're identifying those firms, because it can be hard to find smaller firms.
It's like shooting in the dark. I understand that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think the nice part about firms of that size is usually there can be far more flexibility around things like visa sponsorship, right? Some of them may have not ever experienced that before. In terms of knowing when to submit your application, was there anything online or anything that you found that encouraged you to be applying now versus later?
No, there was nothing specific. In fact, their career page was nothing apart from a single mail upload box, nothing else.
So I would think if I were you, and it's good that you're thinking ahead like this. My gut reaction would be, at this point, if I were you, to try to first, when you're ready, and I think you want to, with networking, one of the things we usually talk about is kind of warming up, practicing, getting yourself ready. If you're on the finance call, we talked a little bit about this, not just starting out by going right away to talk to someone really senior, but having some sort of like practice runs, some reps, talking with classmates, with second years, with other people. So if I were you, I guess my first thought is, I don't think you need to rush. Usually recruiting, there's a little bit of timing with there. So in my mind, things I would want to do first would be keep working on your resume and your networking. making sure that those things are in good shape. A second thing I would do would be find a way to kind of keep an eye on that firm, whether that's following them on LinkedIn, setting up an alert so that if new things are posted on their job posting page, that it comes up, or some other means, just to know if anything does come up quickly that you can try to be aware. Then the next thing I would say would be, if I were you with finance for an MBA role, I would probably try to connect with them within probably by sometime in September or October, was kind of the time frame that I would be thinking about, unless you hear something directly from that company or from a contact otherwise. And so I would try to be working on things in the meantime so that hopefully by that period, your resume can be in really good shape and you can submit. And hopefully before that, you can even do a little networking.
Great. So I had another follow-up question on that. So most of these firms don't have any history where they could provide what kind of employment return you could get on them, or things like that. So how does it work? And especially you showed one slide regarding negotiation. So how does it work in United States? Like, what is the culture there, especially in the finance field, let's say?
So I heard you mention negotiation. So is kind of your question, like, how does it work interacting with an employer when they don't have a specific position? Is that more?
Yes. When they don't have a specific position, and I don't know how much they offer on. I mean,
gotcha.
I know what the job they are looking for, but I don't know. I mean, what is the ballpark figure I could look at?
And that does make it tough. I mean, if a company has a history of sponsoring, one of the great things about using this site like the H-1B data info, I think you mentioned, is you can use some of that to get a sense of what they pay for different roles. But if it's a small company, I mean, they might not have ever hired anybody on an H-1B, and there might not be that data.
So I'm mostly targeting firms which are on H-1B. So they have roles, but they don't have roles as a starting position. Like they have positions in vice president or let's say a manager, but not as an associate.
That may be a good thing to know. If I were you, first off, it's good to know that they're sponsoring, but also to me that says, hey, there's potentially, hopefully, you could cultivate some internal advocates who know what it's like to hire a candidate that would need H-1B sponsorship. But I mean, in terms of knowing exactly what salary would look like at that company, I mean, there's a couple of tools online we could use, things like Transparent Careers and Glassdoor, to try to estimate what salary would look like. But in my mind, if you know that firm is a good firm that you want to work at, you try to network anyways, and then hopefully the salary piece would fall into place later on. That would be, I mean, there's a risk involved there for sure. But I think sometimes that risk is worth taking, especially if you find a really good smaller employer.
And how does negotiation works in all this? And do I have to accept an offer if they give one?
So typically, there's a couple, getting into the negotiation question. One part is when you're applying to the role online, if the company has an online application, sometimes they'll ask what your salary requirements are. And how to respond to that question. I mean, different people kind of address that differently. My suggestion would be to, I think how a lot of companies use that is they look at, most positions have kind of a pay band. And if you're picking something that's way outside that pay band, then a lot of companies are going to think, oh, you want $200,000 and the pay band ends for that role at 125. They're going to say, we don't want to even interview you, because even if we gave you the role, you wouldn't want to take it. You're not going to want to lose that much salary. If it's way less, then they might have other questions like, oh, are you qualified enough? So I think that's one of the ways that they use that early on. When you get to the point of actually getting an offer, or sometimes a little before the offer, salary will probably come up. And that would be the other point where you could negotiate with them. I mean, we can talk more about it. It's kind of a case-by-case thing, but my quick answer with negotiation is you want to try to collect as much data as you can. I mean, the good news is you can use, resources like this. There's other resources out there to try to get a ton of information, so you can have, in my mind, a conversation that's kind of less about, arguing over numbers and trying to be like, hey, here's what the data says. I'm looking to make something that's fair and equitable.
That's a fair point. And I guess it's not frowned upon in the United States when someone is negotiating on a fair point.
Yeah. I mean, there's
If we've done right, definitely.
yeah, and we can, I mean, there's a lot more that we kind of think about when we get to that point, but yeah, I mean, I'm glad you're thinking about negotiation. It's a good thing. And it does happen. There's often, especially with smaller employers, there's often some flexibility. I can think of a student who just graduated who did some negotiating with a very small employer, and it was able to work out, well. So yeah, it is a thing to be thinking about.
So sorry if I'm getting ahead of myself, but yeah, I should
No, it's
just
good.
start.
You're thinking long term. So that's not a bad thing. Yeah.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
You're welcome. Absolutely. And Manuel, did you have any other questions? Not really. Okay. Not really for now. You know where to find me. Well, good. I'm going to stop the recording.